This is Majjhima Nikaya 19, two types of thinking, and it has a parallel in the Chinese Agamas, which is 102, and I've kind of tried to just join them together, and I'll let you know. When the Agama says something a bit different, it's not much difference, but so on one occasion the Blessed One said this: "Bhikkhus, before my enlightenment, while I was still seeking enlightenment, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thinking into two classes. Then I set on one side thinking pertaining to sensuality, aversion and cruelty, and I set on the other side thinking pertaining to non-sensuality or renunciation, non-ill will and non-cruelty. As I lived," and the Agama says, "in solitude," Pali continues, "diligent, persistent, vigilant, a sensual, averse or cruel thought arose in me, and I understood it like this: this class of thinking leads to my own affliction, to the other's affliction, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, sides with difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. When I considered this, that type of thinking subsided in me. Whenever sensual, aversive or cruel thinking arose in me, I abandoned it, tamed it, and brought it to an end. And the Agama says, I did not accept it, I vomited it up, because I saw that countless evil, unwholesome states would certainly arise because of such thoughts."
So, I think we have to stop there. Well, we covered this before, didn't we? But I guess we can repeat. Because it says that when the thought of sensuality arose in him, what did he do? Did he watch moment-to-moment experience? Did he focus on sensations, concentrate on nostrils? Did he do any of that? No. He recognized them for what they are, and he didn't just stay mindful, but he then established the context of the peril, the danger, the lack of satisfaction, the trap, while those thoughts were present. So he develops the context while the thoughts are present, then the context neutralizes them, and they subside, they leave you, they go away. You don't get rid of them, or you don't stop your mind from thinking indirectly, because that's another way of grasping onto the bait. So the emphasis is on the context, and that's how you will vomit it out, for sure.
So you can't just like, okay, oh, this is bad.
But I think you have to do it at some point.
Yeah, but what I mean is that, like, you could easily think, like, you might not actually understand that it's bad, but you just sort of say to yourself, oh, this is bad, oh, this is problematic, this is harmful, but you're actually just not seeing any problem with it and just kind of trying to do. But it's more about actually trying to understand why you have to see that it's harmful.
And as the Bodhisattva, Buddha as Bodhisattva, he already sees this leads away from Nibbana. He's not, he knows what Nibbana is, he knows what it isn't. So this obstructs wisdom. So he already knows why it is bad.
But let's say somebody who is trying to do this practice, who's obviously not a Bodhisattva, they can still do it if they recognize that first and foremost thing is like, yes, thoughts arise on their own, mind thinks on its own, eyes want to see objects, ears want to hear sounds, mind will think thoughts. So the reason why these thoughts are coming is because you have not understood the context of the danger, and you have not understood the context of the danger because you either lack restraint, or on top of that also your views are on the level of just accepting sensual thoughts or getting rid of them. Either way, you're acting out of the discomfort of the pressure that those thoughts put on you. So precepts have to come first: sense restraint, guarding of the sense doors, watchfulness of your intentions, as we repeat so many times. And then when these thoughts arise, you see them. without immediately, impulsively, already being down the rabbit hole of acting out of them. And once they become clearer on the basis of your restraint and kind of that aggregate of virtue that has been developed beforehand, you then get, okay, they are a problem. These thoughts are a problem in a sense of a bait is a problem because I still don't quite know how to not get caught. That's the problem. The fact is, Mara will put the bait in what he controls because it's his. But for as long as you think, no, these thoughts are the problem, I must get rid of these thoughts, you basically are holding the view that Mara has no right to bait you. He has no right to set a trap for you. And that means you're already caught. You're already in that trap. You're already taking what doesn't belong to you. So the practice of virtue and the samadhi that comes out of it, that's what enables you to have the pressuring thought without acting out, without automatically losing perspective. And then you can start this practice. Okay, this pressure, is it pleasant or unpleasant? It's unpleasant. Is it for my welfare? Like, would something set up as a trap be for anyone's welfare? If something is genuinely good, would you need to trap people into it? So you start reflecting like that, and these thoughts will subside. Because you're not anymore providing that ignorant basis that they require. Same goes for ill will, same goes for cruelty.
So would you say that you think, so that thinking on that thought, sort of following it on, that is a choice?
Oh yeah, definitely, sure. Yeah, that's exactly. And so when it says, oh, you abandon these thoughts, that's how you abandon them. By not choosing them, and by actually still emphasizing through your mindfulness and right recollectedness the context of no, it's dangerous. Any involvement with the trap is dangerous. Yes, it's unpleasant for it to be here and pressure me, but not as unpleasant as being hooked by it and then dragged for days and then have to redo everything from the start. So it's unpleasant only because you're still not sure whether you'll be able to restrain yourself. But the only way to become sure is to start restraining yourself. And it is a choice. It's always a choice. Every single time, whenever has anyone in the history of samsara acted out of ill will or sensuality, it was a choice on the level of their thought. Yeah, but I'll say something. Yeah, but I'll do something. It cannot be otherwise. That's the whole point.
Even being able to see that I have a choice here, that's already quite a...
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like you won't start. Yeah, you won't start a practice by seeing that choice. For that, you need to start seeing your mind, and for that, you need to be established in virtue and get the right view. We said that before. When the sutras talk about the unenlightened bodhisattva, it actually means not completely enlightened bodhisattva. It doesn't mean enlightened Putu Jhana doesn't know what he's doing, just roams around the world trying to figure it out. No, it means he already has a pretty good knowledge what enlightenment is, he just hasn't still fully developed it. That's even in here, it's indicated because he already knows what would lead to Nibbana and what wouldn't lead to Nibbana. It means he already has the right view. So any practices that unenlightened bodhisattva does basically means, well, at least you have to have a right view for even those practices to apply to you. And for that right view, you need to be established in virtue. And again, and that's on the level of choice every single time. Right choice or the wrong choice.
But even that, it is still kind of interesting in that in the sutta, he doesn't start by just directly saying, oh, this thought arose, I just abandon it.
Yeah.
He starts by reflecting on the nature of that thought, and then through saying, oh, okay, this is dangerous, this is perilous. And then, whenever the thought arises, because he doesn't need to keep on reflecting about it, he's able to abandon it.
Yeah, the reason why people would immediately jump onto a thought, either to accept it or deny it or cancel it, is because they don't see their mind. So they are fully identified with that which mind is. So this reaction is just the result of that identification. So in order to start actually seeing the difference there, you need to stop acting out, as we say so many times. You have to endure it. You have to endure that pressure and not act out, not break precepts, and not try to get rid of it because it's unpleasant. There's not a way.
And the simile that was included in that is the simile of the cowherd curbing the cows, his cows. So just as in the last month of the rainy season in the autumn, when the crops thicken, a cowherd would guard his cows by constantly tapping and poking them on this side and that with a stick to check and curb them. Why is that? Because he sees that he could be beaten, imprisoned, fined or blamed if he let them stray into others' crops. So too I saw in unwholesome states danger, degradation and defilement, and in wholesome states the blessing and purity of non-sensuality or renunciation.
What do the cows stand for in this simile?
The mind.
Exactly. Yeah. So you don't let the mind wander into the presented pastures of sensuality or ill will or cruelty. You keep an eye on your mind. So I shall not abandon the context of danger, the peril, the trap, because if I do, means cows are already grazing in someone else's field. They're already taking what doesn't belong to me. But I am paired with those cows. People see them as mine. I can say there's nothing's real in reality and these cows don't exist, but well, that won't stop people from beating me if my cows eat in their fields. So it doesn't matter what my views are, practically letting my cows graze in what doesn't belong to me will lead to my...
You're going to feel it.
Yeah, I'm going to pay the price for it. So it would be very unwise to ignore that situation. So he keeps an eye on his cows, so he practices the sense restraint, the context, clarifies it, protects it, so that the cows don't stray into the fields on account of him lapsing and forgetting what's important and getting distracted by, I don't know, sight, sound, smell, taste, touches around the field where he is.
And the curbing and the cowherd, the curbing is that thinking, that choice.
The choice,
Yeah,
it's the choice. Yeah,
So
I can choose to
No.
ignore this, which is right in front of me, or I can choose to know. I will think about the context so that the cows stay in on this side of the fence and they don't go over there.
Yeah. Because
How long do I have to do it? Well, doesn't matter if I have to do it for the rest of my life. I'll do it because, again, if they go into other people's fields, that will be my punishment. But then, as the simile continues later on, other crops will die out. You won't always be there to the same extent. So there will be time where you can relax, but not where the temptations and pressures are right there.
Yeah, even if there isn't an unwholesome state arisen, like ill will or craving, you're still thinking about the possibility, or you're still reflecting on,
Which possibility?
the possibility of ill will or craving arising.
Yeah, sure.
So
Well, that's the
this-
possibility. I mean, it's like, yes, okay, they're not eating in other people's crops now, but the crops, the sensuality, the people that annoy me are still around me, and if I lose the context of that, my mind will jump and leap at the opportunity. So I must emphasize the protecting of my mind, not figuring out or fixing the world or the crops around me that tempt me. That's an endless task.
There's a thought of renunciation, but that thought is not something that you sort of like start fabricating
No, exactly.
manually. It's within the same context, right? That sensuality or
well,
is
when the sensuality is pressuring your ill will, choosing to not go down that and accept that bait, that's the thought of renunciation. It's not a third thing you do upon that.
understanding that sensuality,
Yeah.
that direction, is
Non-sensuality.
developing that non-sensuality,
yeah.
that dispassion for
It's-
sensuality.
Yeah, there was a note in that sutta, sort of in the back of this translation, and it said, "EI, thoughts of loving kindness," and also,
Yeah.
but that
Yeah.
seems very unlikely.
It's
that
completely
would
wrong.
be-
Yeah. You
It's
can
a different
ignore all the
depth,
notes at the back of my journals. It's all from the commentaries and
Yeah.
has absolutely no connection with the actual Dhamma, except on paper. Yeah. No, it's always that. And you could see where all these contemporary worldly views stem from. It's exactly that. Oh, no, see, it's too subtle. Well, again, person who is not developed in virtue, who would have not lived in seclusion, sense restraint, guarding the sense doors, watchful of their intentions, being wakeful, will not see their mind. If they don't see their mind, they would not recognize the whole domain of the middle ground between sensuality, actively thinking sensual thoughts, and not choosing that while those thoughts are present. They will not see that choice. It will not become apparent. So then the only way they could make sense out of this instruction would be, okay, so I must think the opposite. And they wouldn't understand that that's going too far the other way now. Because you will think the opposite with your sensuality. It's because sensuality is here as your context, you're thinking the loving kindness thoughts. Or asubha, any disgust to get rid of it. Because you're already gripped by sensuality, because you already don't see the danger, the peril, because the whole domain of developing the context, it just doesn't exist in that person.
Yeah, and it's that the actual opposite of sensual thinking would be
is non-sensual thinking,
something else that you put on top of sensual thoughts.
Opposite of hate is non-hate, it's not love.
Not love.
And the word is actually, I remember when I first saw that in Pali, I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. It's kama and nekama.
Which is ahimsa, ahimsa.
And anyway, how can you practice love and kindness when you're angry?
Well, according to the commentaries, that's the best time to practice loving kindness.
In an angry way,
Yeah.
So it is kind of quite important to, like, actually means it's not that obvious what constitutes a thought of sensuality, basically, or intention of sensuality. So that's already something, like, you can't just kind of start this practice taking for granted your...
Why wouldn't it be obvious to somebody? Why would that still be unclear to a person?
If they're they're habitually acting out of
they're not
already.
Restraining the body.
Yeah, so when you start restraining, then it becomes more clear.
Then you can restrain your speech, and then it will become obvious what these thoughts are.
Yeah, but even then, like, because restraint then also needs to be then understood as in restraining intentions of, like, greed and delusion.
Exactly.
So it's that
not just doing random physical
things.
practices and observances. Go on.
Okay, so the sutta continues. Bhikkhus, whatever a bhikkhu frequently thinks, vitakas, and ponders upon, vicharas, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon sensuality, he has abandoned the thought of renunciation, or non-sensuality, to cultivate the thought of sensual desire, and then his mind inclines to sensual thinking. Likewise with aversion and cruelty. He has abandoned non-aversion and he has abandoned non-cruelty. And the Agama, Chinese Agama, adds, a monk who has not abandoned thoughts of sensuality, of ill will and cruelty will be unable to free himself from birth, old age, disease and suffering, from tears and weeping. He will not be able to free himself from dukkha.
I remember in the Agama it also said, which I kind of liked the combination, it said, whatever a monk frequently, or whatever person frequently thinks and ponders upon, his mind will delight in that. And then in the Pali it says that will become the inclination of his mind. So you frequently think and ponder it, your mind delights in that direction, and that inclines your mind.
An interesting point that I actually have a question about, because especially now you're quite secluded, so it's very, you are more confronted with your thoughts, which is, for this practice pretty good, but then you can really start to, even in things that maybe not so obviously sensual, you will still delight in your thinking, because you're by yourself, and then you catch a thread, and it can be agreeable at least.
Yeah, and that's that choice we're talking about.
But then, it's sort of,
you can choose to not accept the agreeability.
Yeah.
Like, you find your mind thinking those thoughts. So as I said, you can't just stop it, because in a way you are not doing it. You're subjected to it. But you are then goading on the mind carelessly, or showing it the danger.
But for that, you need to really develop further on understanding wholesome and unwholesome, of course.
No, you don't need to develop the understanding of it in the sense of you need to figure it out. You need to develop virtue in the body and the speech. So not fuel it through unwholesome intentions that you act out of on the level of the body and speech. So, you're withdrawn from the coarse things in the world, but there are still things that by body and by speech are rooted in those same intentions. And every single time, on a day-to-day basis, you choose to engage with them. Or not every single time, but most of the time. And that's why the clarity between truly what's wholesome and unwholesome is still not seen, because you are still polluting it with your actions. So that's like it would always be the dwell restrained by the precepts, be secluded and so on, but then speech as well. Don't just don't disappear like mentally in like a chit chat or pointless debates and stuff like that that's gripped with passion, intention, and ideas. Because but I'm losing the self-awareness on account of doing this. And it's kind of also impulsive. There's that if a mind decides to say something, it's like what is that sutta? It will be said because it's like you have to kind of go against it.
Yes, a very difficult thing to
not do. So you recognize, so again, you can't necessarily stop that impulse overnight, but you could certainly start directing it away from just careless, pointless, meaningless. That's why often even like those 8 practice precepts would sometimes be changed and would include those like ways of right speech, like the gossip, the chit chat, the slander, and you abstain from all of that as a practice, not as some sort of religious observance. And that's how you would clarify that. And then even if you don't make the effort to figure out wholesome as wholesome and unwholesome, you will, because you stop polluting it.
So as I lived in solitude, diligent, persistent and vigilant, thinking pertaining to non-sensuality, non-aversion or non-cruelty arose in me. I understood thus: this thinking pertaining to non-sensuality, non-aversion, non-cruelty has arisen in me. This does not lead to my own affliction or to the affliction of others or to the affliction of both. It aids wisdom, does not cause difficulty, and leads to nibbana. If I think and contemplate these thoughts, even for a night, even for a day, even for a night and day, I see nothing to fear from them. And the Agama adds, I rapidly developed it, made much of it. If a thought was with non-sensuality arose in me, I intentionally kept on thinking it. And so on, just kept on. And then back to the Pali. But with excessive thinking and contemplation, I might tire my body. And when the body is tired, the mind becomes disturbed. And when the mind is disturbed, it is far from samadhi, composure. And the Agama says the same. If I further had this thought, if I intentionally kept on thinking, my body will lose strength and my mind will be troubled. Let me rather keep my mind in check within, continuously dwelling in a calm, unified, elevated, having attained composure so that my mind will not be troubled.
Okay, so there's an important point there. The difference between the certain implication in Pali and the certain implication in the Agama that describes it.
Well, the main things that the Agama says that he intentionally developed and cultivated these thoughts and kept on thinking it before he came to the point of sort of realizing, okay, if I keep on thinking this forever now, my mind will be disturbed.
So on the basis of that Chinese part, you can see that fatigue and tiredness comes on account of intentional work of thinking the right context, not simply on account of having thoughts. Oh, I had these wholesome thoughts coming, but these thoughts, basically presence of thoughts means fatigue, so I must stop thinking to calm myself down. No. I must stop actively think these thoughts after I have withdrawn them from sensuality. They're still there. They're still coming, otherwise how would I know they're still wholesome? So that's the tiring part, the work, not the thoughts in themselves. And again, you can only say, I can rest once you did the work. Not like, oh, well, that work is tiring, thus I shall unify my mind here and not even start with the work.
What would be the criteria for discerning the mind is agitated on account
Fatigue.
of fatigue?
And loss of composure.
Not like agitated, not like.
Well, you wouldn't be going back to sensuality,
But like.
but you would just not be calm. The
like,
mind would be revolving around aspects of Dhamma and so on in a wholesome way, but you realize, okay, it's too much. What for? Why am I doing this? I'm doing it to be, well, I started doing it because I withdrew myself from sensuality and ill will, but I am not going back to sensuality and ill will, so I might as well stop doing this for now. Not stop thinking, but stop intentionally kind of fueling and revolving around those wholesome thoughts. Stop the intentional part of vitaka vichara. Not get rid of the vitaka vichara altogether. Because that's the purpose. It's not in and of itself develop constant asubha and constant disgust. No, it's like some minds are more frequently inclined towards sensuality than others. So you keep losing the context here. So make some effort when sensuality is not present, when you're not under the pressure of enduring it. Cultivate the ugly, the repulsive and all of that, so that then context will be there waiting when sensuality comes. Non-sensuality, non-ill will, non-cruelty, those thoughts, aspects of Dhamma, clarity of the presence of the phenomena and so on. Thinking that intentionally fortifies the context, but you realize, okay, but I am constantly thinking. So why don't I calm down? Why don't I stop the intentional picking up of these thoughts? And that's why it's actually First Jhana. This, what Agama describes, is the First Jhana. When thinking and pondering has been thoroughly withdrawn from wandering back into 5 hindrances, sensuality, ill will, cruelty, and then you recognize that it's quite secluded now. There are no more concerns, joys, worries in regard to the world. All you have is thinking and pondering of a very clear nature that you have actively developed in regard to unwholesome states, withdrew it from, purified from, and you realize, oh, so I can stop doing this now. And when you stop doing it, that's that pleasure born of seclusion from unwholesome states that was developed beforehand. How the Pali Sutras describe jhana as well.
The cows are safe. The whole situation is safe.
No more temptations. How we drew them onto the field that's not surrounded by other people's crops and so on. I train them. They never wander away. They go a bit. They come back. I would allow them. I would bring them. I would allow them. I would bring them. I would allow them. I would bring them. Now I allow them, and I realize they come back on their own. I don't need to go and bring them. I don't need to allow them. They won't go anywhere. Let me just sit and rest while thoughts and pondering is here around me, surrounding me. And that's exactly what the First Jhana is. But see, the work, the pleasure of that rest comes after you did the work. Not how, again, the whole commentary and today's practice expects it to be. Oh, I'm deeply immersed in sensuality. I'm going to find a direct pathway, access through a meditation technique, through some pleasure of a different kind, and that's why I will forsake all of this. That's another sensual pleasure.
So I steadied my mind internally, settled it, brought it to singleness and composure, so that my mind would not be disturbed. And that's what we would say is that First Jhana, basically. And the simile is of the cowherd resting while watching the cows, as you've said. He just has to be mindful that the cows are there. So too, there was need for me only to be mindful that those states were there. Persistent diligence was manifested in me, and recollection was not forgotten. My body was calm and unagitated, my mind settled and elevated. And then the Agama goes into description of second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana.
After that.
Yeah. Whereas the Pali goes into just the standard first, second, third, fourth.
So in that sense you would say that quite contrary to belief that jhana is in that sense, even more like intentional, instead of waiting for it.
The development of withdrawal from unwholesome states, it's the development. It's not a magical kind of thing that would happen on account of this observance or that observance. That's why the monk trains himself thus. He abandons this state. He arouses diligence to not tolerate the arisen thoughts of sensuality, but actually work on the context of danger in regard to them. How do you tolerate thoughts of sensuality, by the way? You can tolerate thoughts of sensuality by actively accepting them, delighting in them, thinking them, fantasizing them further, acting out of them. But you can also tolerate the thoughts of sensuality by knowing that you should think about the peril, the danger, the bait, the trap, the debt, the chopping block, all the similes the Buddha gave. But I'm too tired to think about it. I'll rest now, I'll think about it tomorrow. That's how I tolerate it. That's why diligence is not there. But then, equally, you're tolerating them, or tolerating what sensuality brings onto you by trying to get rid of it. When these thoughts are present, you don't want to think of the context while they're harassing you. You just want them to stop harassing you. So I'll just think a soup, I'll just think the opposite. That's how you get rid of this. That's how you overcome the hindrances. No, not even close. So the work is on sustaining the context, investing the work on that mental level, without any single exception. So that doesn't mean you have to do it all the time, but means that whenever the sensuality is pressuring you, you have to do it.
See the danger, see what it is, see the nature.
The danger, the peril. Again, you might feel like I'll do this to get rid of the pressure. Well, no, I'll do this for its own sake, for the sake of developing the context. Doesn't matter how long I'm under this pressure. That's just an extra thing that's trying to distract me from my work.
So you have to try to get to, since this thing's coming around every day, this aversion, this sensuality, I might as well get to know it, get to know its nature.
Well, yeah, but see, the problem with that statement is, I'll get to know it, I'll investigate it, I'll come closer to it, I'll induce it, I'll psychologize it. No, you don't have to know it, you don't have to pay attention to it, but you need to sustain the recollection of the danger that if you touch it, you're inflicting the eons of pain upon you. That's it. If you touch it, if you accept it, if you reach for it, doesn't matter whether it's to accept it or get rid of it. If you put your hand there, you're trapped. That's it. Mara doesn't care if you resist or not, as long as you affirm it. And that's the point.
This is the same as the purifying of the thought we spoke the other day. London Mata.
Exactly. Yeah, it's exactly that. Yeah.
And it's like, as the sutras say so much, it's whatever brings wholesome states to arise and develop, whatever causes and increases the abandoning of the unwholesome. So it's like you need to be able to see that, what causes wholesome states to arise and increase, what causes unwholesome states to diminish.
And you would see that if you see your intentions.
Exactly.
If your intention is still just trying to get rid of things that bother you internally, it doesn't matter what you're trying to figure out, you're doing it for wrong reasons, you're acting out. And that's why it won't work.
And that's the thing, like once you, if you can see your intentions clearly, then it's not difficult to decide or to kind of, you don't need to kind of, it's not such a big deal to figure out, okay, what must I think about, what must I do? It's really just quite simple, like what's the intention.
But it is very clear what one must do.
Yeah.
Keep the precepts, guard the sense doors, watch your mouth in terms of don't engage in careless, pointless, ridiculous, distracting speech that results in, like, again, having to then redo and recompose everything else. Watch your intentions, guard the sense doors, be secluded as much as you can. Those are factual things you can do.
This is I thought I'd bring this up as well because basically the Noble Eightfold Path, and the second point in that is so from right view, then it's right Sammasankappa. That is the second. And Sammasankappa, I'll just read this section. when you understand wrong sankappa as wrong sankappa and right sankappa as right sankappa, that's your right view. So sankappa is like the Pali, together, making, determined, creating, and it's translated as intention or thought usually. So it's the right thought, but it's the right inclination, your right attitude or direction of your thinking. So that is your right view, seeing what is the right way of thinking and the wrong way of thinking. And what is the wrong way, sankappa?
Hold on, while we're there. So, I'm just trying to formulate a question for people using the simile of the cows. So, the right view. See, the point is, like, it's not just to figure out what's right intention and what's wrong intention, or to study it and, like, you know, get the etymology of the word, and now I have the right view because I got all the information. It's to see the relationship that we've been describing for 45 minutes now of the right, of the thoughts, right or wrong thoughts, and the mind. To see that direct link between the pastures and the cows and your responsibility in it. Because now you are the cows. You don't even see the cows. You're completely identified. So you see the pastures, you go, or you want to get rid of it or whatever, but you don't see the weight. This affects the mind. No matter what views I have, what I hold, whatever. Factually, when this is present, mind goes that way. When this is present, mind goes that way. Understanding that, understanding the weight of that, the peril of that, the escape from that, is the right view. It's basically understanding the root of suffering and the way out of it, because that's where the suffering is. And that's exactly what Sama Sankappa is. Okay, so again, whatever I might think about the pastures and the bait and the cows, doesn't matter. What matters is that when these types of thoughts are present, this is how cows behave. Is that for my benefit? No. Is that for my welfare? No. Is that for my unburdening? No. And then the opposite. When these thoughts are present, this is how cows don't behave, and this is what they don't do, and that is for my welfare. That is for the... Even if I just want to stay a householder, it's still actually better for me if the mind obeys me, if my own mind is in my control. Factually, nobody can dispute that. And you recognize exactly what brings that control or what decreases it. And that's why then the one with the right view would understand what the right training of the mind is. Whether he engages in it or not, that's a separate thing, but he would at least know exactly where it boils down to. So that's, right view leads to this recognition of right sankappa.
Yeah, so what is wrong sankappa is thoughts of sensuality, aversion, and cruelty.
And that's why it's wrong. It's not because it's written on the sky that these things are evil. It's wrong because the mind always reacts in this way, which always results in, again, more burden, more hassle, more distraction, more peril, more debt, more payments later. Always, no exceptions.
That's like on every level, like from the most mundane to the highest. It goes, you can see it at a basic level, but it pertains to the entire...
all the way through. Yeah.
And you have to ignore this image, the thought of there being two types of thought. That is pointing in the direction of seeing wholesome and unwholesome.
Yeah, well, see, that's just, I would, as the Bodhisattva said, I would divide them into two categories. So you already cease to be concerned with every particular thought.
The content.
Of the content, exactly. Oh, it's like this, well, but this one's slightly different. But it doesn't matter. Does it partake in sensuality? Yes, that's the basket. Everything else is irrelevant. Its particularities. Does it partake in ill will? Yes, that's the basket you put it in. That's it. So you gotta learn and make the effort to keep emphasizing that. the general nature that this thought partakes in, and not be already pulled by the content, because see, that's already being trapped. Being fully absorbed in the content of your thoughts and ignoring the fact that the nature of a sensual thought is still the same sensuality, well, you have a lot of work to do then. And again, you would be ignoring that if you're not developed in the body, and certainly not developed in speech, not restrained enough. If you are, then it becomes you are forcing yourself away from being too kind of engaged with automatically with the content of your thoughts. So you're broadening up the field a bit.
And then it continues to say, and what is the right sankappa? Thought that is noble, undefiled, a factor of the path. It's the thinking, the directing of the mind, the contemplating, the application, the verbal sankhara, in one of noble mind, undefiled, who possesses the noble path and develops the noble path. And they make an effort to give up wrong sankappa, wrong thought, and take on right thought. That's their right effort. And then mindfully, through recollection, they give up wrong thought and take up right thought. That's their right mindfulness. So these three things keep running and circling around right sankappa, right thought, namely right view, right effort, right mindfulness.
Yeah, in relation to this, I find useful is the phenomenon of movement and so like unwholesome thoughts agitate the mind, and absorb it in movement, whereas wholesome thoughts still the mind.
Yeah, well, it kind of again comes down to that. If you just think about it phenomenologically about the nature of a trap, like there's always some sweet reward of some sort. And you watch the nature documentaries, and you have those closing flowers and stuff. They trap the insects, but it's not even that hard or much of a stretch to recognize. Oh well, human realm is not that different. It's always like this trap, and then like 10 years later, it's like just this weight on you, and you realize, oh, you're imprisoned, and you have been since that day. And that's exactly that. You realize that if your own thoughts pressure you, and it's unpleasant, and offer you a reward if you act out of it, that's a trap. And as the suttas describe, again, you don't need to know who set it up. Say you walk in the nature, and you see a weird noose, and then some loose leaves. Now, would you be able, by any stretch of your imagination, to think that somebody set it up for a good purpose? Would that even occur to you? No. And that's exactly what the sutta said. A hunter does not set up a trap wishing for welfare. So you recognize your own thoughts have a setup of a trap, and it's like, well, that cannot be for my welfare, accepting that. And that's how far that principle goes. And that's that choice we spoke about. When you do have a choice to then, but still, you're trapped to that extent. And if you're trapped in your thoughts, you'll be trapped in your speech, you'll be trapped in your body eventually.
What I had, in relation to that trap, I had thinking about because it's like the thing is you start trapped. You kind of start, it's as though like you take this body as something pleasant, agreeable and good, because you start as in this with this intoxication of youth, intoxication of health. You think that these things tend to take these things for granted. And by virtue of you happen to now be young and healthy, you can access pleasant sight, sound, smells, taste, touches. But it's like, you imagine if somebody were to have kidnapped you and be holding you hostage or something, and they say, any day that they keep that it's not hidden from you. Any day that they might start torturing you, or they're going to kill you, and they tell you that. Like there's nobody is hiding. And
you see it happening to other prisoners.
Happening to other prisoners. They've got it, but for the time they're kind of playing with you. I'll give you some video games to play. I'll give you some good food, and and you wouldn't be.
And you forget.
You forget that you're actually held hostage, but if you were to actually stop taking these things, you could see that there's a way out, basically.
Well, that's the only way out. Yeah,
by stopping to take them.
Because you don't start by being free.
Yeah.
So you have no reference point that you're now a hostage. Your starting point is fully distracted hostage, fully distracted prisoner.
That's the problem.
And the way to become aware of the situation of the prison is stop taking up distractions intentionally.
Yeah.
And then you would, and that's exactly why people fear that.
Mm.
Like solitude, boredom. Just boredom is terrifying to people. Like even you don't have to go to great solitude and fearful places and so on, wilderness. Just stop distracting yourself and sit alone in your room, and you're gonna just boredom will be like, because that already reveals, well, the outer
situation.
the outer end of this situation.